Hello, I'm Chris E. Vargas, the Executive Director of the Museum of Transgender Hirstory Art. I'm excited to be speaking to you from far into the future, where there is no global pandemic, no police targeting of Black people, no cops at all, no murdering of Black trans women, no prison or jails, no immigration detention facilities, no borders, no walls, no presidents, and it goes without saying, no threats of a dictatorship. Still some climate catastrophes, but we're finally turning things around. It's a wonderful world that MOTHA exists within, and I'm happy you'll soon be joining me. I mention all these things because even if they no longer exist, it is a world we just narrowly escaped. Capitalism and its exploitation of the Earth's resources and people were nearly a death sentence for the planet. Actually, the term death sentence doesn't even exist in our current vocabulary anymore, so why did I just say it? Forget I did. The revolution has come. Ladies, gentlemen, theydies, and gentle people, I'm happy to share with you the new and improved post-revolutionary Museum of Transhistory and Art, or MOTHA. MOTHA is a sanctuary for the people, like all museums are now. It is a place that celebrates our trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming art and history with specific attention to the contributions of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. That means this is programmatically our focus as an institution, as well as the audience we wish to center. In other words, MOTHA doesn't water down its content for non-trans audiences. Instead, it asks those unlucky to not be born trans to step up and meet us where we're at, to understand our experience on our terms, not the other way around. So it goes without saying that there is no price for admission, and our doors are wide open. In fact, there are no doors, therefore no threshold fear, no intimidating barriers that would prevent anybody, regardless of race, class, or gender, from walking in. Inside, there are bathrooms for every gender imaginable, even agender folks. This was in the original plans for the museum, and I'm happy to report they are finally realized. The facilities at MOTHA are also accessible to all people with disabilities, and not one single stair exists in our building. All labels are large print and audible for non- and partially sighted individuals, and there are sign language interpreters for all our programs. The building itself is self-sufficient energetically and runs on 100% renewable energy. We harvest our building's electricity from the sun and the wind with bird-safe turbines and solar panels on our roof. It is also a zero waste facility, so all wastewaters feed the edible fruit, vegetable, and herbal gardens on our grounds. The gardens themselves grow food served in the cafe and are also made into herbal elixirs and tinctures that protect and fortify the trans body. Here at MOTHA, we value the planet and all beings that exist upon it, even cisgender people. Here at MOTHA, all people's labor is valued and our workers are compensated well and fairly. Dare I say, extravagantly. Here at MOTHA, everyone is paid exactly the same. Myself, the executive director, people on the curatorial staff, security guards, janitorial, preparators, front desk, gift shop sales associates, interns, every single person. We're all paid exactly the same. In fact, no one has a title or a rank or a job description. So all the previous distinctions I just mentioned don't exist. I just use them so you'd understand me. We all share responsibility for the facilities. You might find me cleaning the toilets, or the toilet cleaners of yore curating exhibitions. MOTHA recognizes that everyone plays an important role in the existence of this museum. Gone are the days when the museum director was paid double or triple what everyone else was paid. After many years of existence as a conceptual art project, MOTHA finally has its own collections. Given the fraught history of museum collections, it has thought carefully and strategically about this. Here at MOTHA, we collect a vast amount of art by trans artists from all over the world, not just the US, which was our very narrow focus early on. We also work to acquire trans art from other collections with the knowledge that it is better honored and celebrated here. Yes, museums were once tombs and warehouses for stolen goods, housing the captured booty of conquest and colonialism, but no more. Along with our decision to become a collecting institution, we have urged our sibling institutions to pay reparations in full. And we are happy to report that they have heeded our call through a mass movement of repatriation and restitution. All materials sacred to Indigenous communities have been returned to their rightful guardians, and all stolen and pillaged objects obtained by dubious means have been returned. Even so, we must never forget humanity's potential to rob, cheat, and steal in the name of power and dominance, not even just for the thrill of it. We here at MOTHA think it is important to keep an eye firmly on the injustices of the past, lest they repeat. We must also acknowledge, however, that we often look toward the past in a self-serving way, and that's not always a bad thing. We look for identification, for models of living. We look to situate our experiences historically, to know we are not alone, that we have transcestors who have paved the way for us and who are looking out for us. Our trans history exhibits pay homage to these important figures and the events they affected. And our approach to history recognizes that the way we understand and describe ourselves through language is constantly evolving. Even to designate a museum as transgender or trans sets itself up to quickly become out of step. In fact, we have a new term we use in the future that is going to shock you. I'd tell you, but I don't want to make any time travel mistakes. But regardless of the language we use, transgender, transsexual, gender nonconforming, non-binary, we must bring these stories out into the open. On that note, I want to talk about a series of landmark exhibitions that MOTHA undertook from 2015 until 2019, back in the desperate days before we had a building of our own. MOTHA's inaugural exhibition series, Trans Hirstory in 99 Objects, was a visual and material exploration of objects, including moving image documents and public monuments that held significance in narrating the history of trans communities. When I researched this project, I visited LGBTQ and trans archives throughout Canada and the US. God, everything was about the US back then. So glad it doesn't exist anymore. The project attended not only to found objects, but also to those that had been entirely lost to Hirstory. Rather than try to outdo the British Museum's 100 objects, or the Smithsonian's 101, the original influences for the project, MOTHA's chosen number of 99 was a pre-acknowledgement of the roadblocks and limitations inherent in the project's undertaking. After assessing the absences in various collections, I solicited other trans artists to fabricate missing objects. I also exhibited work by trans artists who were already engaging with this history in their practice. The Trans Hirstory in 99 Objects exhibitions were always, almost always, explicit about the fabricated nature of the objects. The first iteration of the project took place at the One National Gay and Lesbian Archives in 2015. One was and still remains the largest LGBT archive in North America and sprang out of the early homophile organization of the same name. It was bankrolled by trans philanthropist Reed Erickson. For this show, I focused on legends and mythologies, or Hirstories that predate the trans historical record, the trans pre-historical, if you will. For instance, Bay Area artist Nikki Green created It's Almost As If We've Existed, Tres en Una, which historicized the trans body within a neoclassical sculptural tradition and transposed it onto a ceramic vessel. These are the reference images Nikki used for the illustrations for her vessel. One is photoshopped and one is not. I'll let you figure out which one is which. For the same show, Tuesday Smiley created a banner inspired by Greek ancient poet and lesbian icon Sappho, whose poetry only exists today as fragments. The banner showcases its loose threads and exposed seams as a way of speaking directly to the fragmented, stitched-together nature of queer history in its combination of the known and the unknowable. Also included in the show was a photo album belonging to eccentric trans philanthropist Reed Erickson, who was an early funder of the homophile organization, The One Institute, as I just mentioned. Erickson supported many early social service and medical organizations in service of other trans people, as well as far out, at the time, research projects like psychedelic mushrooms and dolphin communication. For the second iteration of the show, which took place at the Henry Art Gallery in Seattle, I focused exclusively on trans histories of the US Pacific Northwest. One of the most exciting pieces in the show was the lampshade crown, which made its debut in 1975 and is the crown for the Imperial Sovereign Court of Seattle and the Olympic and Rainier Empire, which is part of the larger international imperial court system, which I assure you is still reigning strong into the future. The court system, founded in 1965 by San Francisco activist and performer Jose Sadia, grew into the second largest LGBTQ organization in North America, with over 65 chapters in the US, Canada, and Mexico. The original lampshade crown remains one of the most iconic artifacts in the international court system, and a heavier replica of the original is used to this day. Another piece in the show was Lorenzo Treburgo's Policing Gender Project, which explored trans and queer identities in the context of mass incarceration. The figureless images of drapery, together with the aerial views of landscapes, served as meditations on the public absence of those who are most vulnerable to criminalization within the trans community: people of color, trans women, poor people, and people who are mentally ill. For the third iteration of the project in Victoria, British Columbia, I presented archival materials from the University of Victoria's Transgender Archives, alongside work by contemporary artists from both inside and outside the collection. The University of Victoria is unique in that it not only contains documents and publications, lots and lots of paper, the Trans Archives also has an immense collection of visual art, including work by world-renowned artists and art made by and featuring important trans historical figures. One of the most high-profile examples is Misty and Joey at Hornstrasse, Berlin, a print by New York City-based artist Nan Golden, who famously chronicled the queer and punk countercultural scenes of downtown New York in the 70s and 80s. Another piece in the exhibition was by Canadian artist Vivek Shreya, who engaged in their own intervention with history in their photo essay project Trisha. In it, the artists restaged photos from their family archive and stepped into the role of their own mother, reckoning with familial legacies as they are passed down through gendered projections and expectations. With the fourth iteration of the 99 Objects project at the Portland Art Museum, I moved away from a straightforward exploration of trans archives and instead explored a trans moving image history. I focused exclusively on moving image work and created something that visually resembled a trans video store. Do you remember video rental stores? They've totally come back. Be kind, rewind. Anyway, the walls featured hand-drawn wallpaper of 90 trans films from a wide range of genres, including the trans horror film, the temporary transvestite film, and a myriad of other genres where trans characters were depicted in styles ranging from sympathetic subjects to objects to be gawked at, as well as movies made by and about trans people, movies made by non-trans people about trans people, movies made by trans people about non-trans people, movies made by every combination imaginable. Also included in the exhibition was a program of 9 short moving image works by contemporary, at the time, trans artists and filmmakers. For example, yet another iteration took place at the Oakland Museum of California in 2019. The installation Trans Hirstories of the Bay Area, which was part of the larger landmark exhibition Queer California Untold Stories, contained objects and artworks that engaged with some of the rich trans histories of the San Francisco Bay Area. On display was artwork and archival materials related to the legendary disco queen, Sylvester, the first out gay trans man, Lou Sullivan, the psychedelic drag performance troupe, the Coquettes, artist Jerome Kaja, Louise Lawrence, Miss Major, and Compton's Cafeteria. Most notably, the exhibition contained a large amount of Latinx material because, as you know, California was Mexico at one point, and so great that it is again. The show included photographs from the project Q-Sides by Vero Majano, Amy Martinez, and Carrie Orvik. The Q-Sides is a queer imagining of the album covers of the East Side Story LPs that originated in East Los Angeles in the late 70s and early 80s. The iconic bootlegged compilations of 1960s soul and R&B hits became a soundtrack for the predominantly heteronormative Chicano lowrider culture. Q-Sides is a queer and trans retelling of these classic lowrider love stories. Another piece in the show, Viva 16, is an amazingly important documentary about queer and trans Latinx culture in San Francisco's Mission District in the 1990s. It is centered around the bar Esta Noche, which was located on 16th Street, hence the name Viva 16. The bar and cabaret were a safe haven for the queer and trans Latinx community in San Francisco, who might have felt out of place or who were actively discriminated against in the predominantly white Castro district. By 1997, it was the only Latinx bar on 16th Street, and due to the rising costs of real estate in the city, a result of a wave of tech-induced gentrification, it announced its closing in 2014. The graphic wallpaper in the show featured the iconic Esta Noche sign, as well as images of figures like Adela Vasquez, a Cuban-American HIV prevention activist and performer who organized with the community-based health organization Proyecto Contra SIDA por Vida, or Proyecto. She sought asylum in the US in 1980. In 1992, she was crowned Miss Gay Latina. And lastly, the iteration which was presented at the New Museum in 2018 into 2019, Consciousness Raising the Stonewall Rememorialization Project, focused exclusively on Stonewall as a geographically, demographically, and historically contested site. The installation worked to question and destabilize what we know about the 1969 incident of rebellion against police harassment that is credited as the inception of both gay liberation and the modern LGBTQ civil rights movement. When the tale of Stonewall and the people associated with it, like Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, and Miss Major, became co-opted by a liberal LGBT history, much of the radical politics, as well as particulars relating to racism, economic marginalization, and transphobia, were diluted or swept under the rug. The installation worked against this liberally inclusive approach to historicizing, like, once we get it right, things will be fine, and instead pointed out the ways that narrating a stable history does the past a disservice, and how the project of historicizing is inherently biased and self-serving. Meanwhile, I did this with full acknowledgement that uncovering and recuperating our past remains an important project. For the exhibition, I invited artists to propose new memorials for Christopher Park, the park outside of the Stonewall Inn. 12 artists were chosen, a multi-generational group representing a variety of queer identities, all with a stake in the history. They were asked to think about new ways to memorialize the events that didn't serve a neat historical trajectory, to respond to the ways these riots had been historicized over the last 50 years, and to do reparative work to fill in blanks of what had been omitted, all while recognizing that the act of creating monuments is always a fraught endeavor. For the 1:7 scale model of Christopher Park, the artists made miniature versions of their monument proposals to be displayed there, and each artist's maquette was rotated in and out of the park throughout the run of the show. That brings me back to the future, or actually my present, so back to your future. The last show in the 99 Objects series informs our current approach to monuments here at the MOTHA facilities. Like the New Museum show, the monuments we have on our premises rotate on a very regular basis. We do this for a few reasons. One, so we don't monumentalize just one or a few individuals, but instead challenge ourselves and the public to mine our history for the lesser-known figures who are also important. Yes, of course, we have a monument to Marsha P. Johnson, but we also make room for other figures like Mary Jones, famous pickpocket and the first known trans woman in New York State, and Angela Douglas, who founded TAO, Transsexual Action Organization, and made the important link between intelligent alien life and trans people, which now, of course, has been totally substantiated. Don't worry, the aliens will explain this to you one day soon. And B, we also want to acknowledge that our heroes are people too, and therefore imperfect. We must allow their honorable actions to exist next to ones that we may not agree with. We must be wary about how we measure the actions and statements of those we venerate from the past. We here at MOTHA also don't shy away from troubled figures, people with imperfect report cards. They'll have a place too. No one has lived a perfect life through and through. At best, we've all made the best decisions we could have made with the knowledge and tools available to us at the time. Also, morality was complicated when people were making survival decisions under capitalism. As you're all aware, compromises sometimes have to be made. Finally, that brings me to the future of the future. Now that MOTHA has its own building and its own galleries, we no longer need to beg Dickensian-like to have off-site exhibitions and programming. We're no longer at the mercy of the patronizing patronage of other institutions. We are totally autonomous and free to envision our space exactly as we wish. Along with creating quality programming and top-notch facilities, we want to continue to be a model for other museums. We want to raise the bar high and keep raising it higher and higher. Yes, I assure you that the revolution has come, but there is so much work still to do. We must not slide into complacency. We must not only demand, but expect quality, comfort, pleasure, joy, good art, good food, safe facilities, and extravagant paychecks. The future you want is near. I look forward to you joining me.